Right, so it's clear I've sussed out what's going on with this Assisted Suicide Act now and what's happening with it, how they're managing to get it through, right? Because this Jersey state has passed it. I don't know if the King's actually signed it yet. I'm not sure if he has or not, right? But there are lots of House of Lords people in England supposedly opposing it, but they're not truly opposing it because they haven't called it out. They haven't called their fellow Lords out for crimes, lying, misconduct in public office, perjury of oath, making up falsification of facts, right? You got to act according to law. So I sent petitions against these assisted dying acts in UK Parliament quite a while ago when Kim Leadbeater first introduced them, right? But all based on religious law, actually existing religious law that says that it's in law, right? You know that like the Ten Commandments, right, is Hebrew law, but it's actually enacted into UK law that thou shalt not kill in the Ten Commandments anyway. And I based it around that with some other supporting religious laws like freedom of the church and like the establishment of the church and the liberties of the church. And some of the Scotland acts that actually acknowledge that the Hebrew law is, the Hebrew Ten Commandments is actual law. It's actually made into Scottish law. It's the law, right? Ironically. And I put a very compelling petition to the House of Lords, and then subsequently from that, I think it did help towards contributing towards a lot of the House of Lords opposing this bill, or at least like several of them have been vehemently opposed to it, right? Now, this is the thing, right? I try and not make this video long because it needs to be a brief summary, right? I report it to the police, but the police might not act because they might not see where the crime is. Well, look, at the time when I complained, it was purely based on religious law, which is fact and law in effect, right? So it was a solid argument anyway, but I hadn't actually even got around to the Human Rights Act to Article 2. I knew the Human Rights Act through the provisions, right? You know, through Section 6 and 7, right? Mainly to do with the rights that have been used in political law, right? But the right to life in Article 2 is actually very quite specific, and you know they do quote it in this briefly, but that's about it. There's very few paragraphs on it in this whole paper, which is quite long. If you type in the search words for Article 2 and the right to life through it, there's a lot of jargon around a lot of other things that don't concern that, and then they just throw it in a little bit, and then what they do in this paper, right, is they this is not a professional paper to get law through, that's for sure. This is like college level. It's like it wouldn't pass a dissertation because it's got too much plagiarism used from other governments and other cases, and it's not its own argument. It's definitely not its own argument, and it's not being critical about it. It's basically copy-paste some other stuff that Switzerland have done on something which is vaguely related, but actually that it doesn't even say that they can do it anyway, those cases, and then put a really very weak and poor argument together through that. How can it even hold up to any criticism? It can't, right? So it's basically saying that in Switzerland, right, some of the EU law has decided that people have got the right to take their own life, or, you know, if they want to end their life themselves, right, but not the courts take it or the government take it, because Article 2 says the courts and the government can't take it, right? But they shoehorn that in with some sort of, oh, well, you know, they've said that, you know, people can take their lives if they want to end it early, you know, themselves. So therefore, that's a good excuse for us to make an excuse of, you know, to say, oh, well, we should have assisted dying. But what they don't say is this: the Human Rights Act, 1998, Article 2 says that, and it's not tenuous. It's not like maybe yes, maybe no, or you can base arguments around this. There is no arguments you can base around it, right? It says governments, including the courts, right, because the courts are government, right, can't take life. They're not allowed to. They've got to protect it. And protecting it doesn't mean like weaving in like a reverse psychology argument that, oh, well, if they're suffering, if they're hurting, if they're in pain, by killing them and taking their life away, we're saving the life. Well, no, because as soon as you get the dictionary out, as soon as you get Samuel Johnson's dictionary out, what does life mean? And the Webster's dictionary and Cambridge dictionary and Oxford, right? When you get them all out and say, what is life to start with? This is a proper university critical argument with information and points and arguments from both sides and criticising the meaning of the words. There's none of this in this. This is like cut and paste college stuff. Oh, we'll just throw a citation in from a vague Switzerland case with like a paragraph of a ridiculously loose argument around it, which is completely and totally nonsensical and ill-founded, to shoehorn it into like, all right, well, we'll make this law now, and then someone signs it at the top and says, oh, like, I declare compatibility. What? You've got to be kidding me, right? What is life? It says that life is a living and alive, and also the experience of life through its joys and pains, right? Whether you're sad or happy. In fact, it even said unhappiness is life and part of life in the dictionary, right? 1700s in the dictionary, life means to be alive and in a state of happiness or misery. It's to be living and alive. That's part of life. So to protect life, according to the dictionary meaning definition term, is to be in the state of being alive, right? So anything for killing it is not protecting life. You're ending life. You're not protecting it, right? In any of its living states. To be alive in the dictionary includes being alive and in sadness, being alive and in happiness, right? So to kill life is to end that. It can't pass it for the meaning of life. It's impossible. And there are multiple, there's no other interpretation or alternative interpretation in that dictionary, right? There's no reverse psychology argument under the meaning of preserving life to kill it or end it in any way on account of being unhappy with it or in misery. None. Zero. Zilch. None in the dictionary. In fact, the dictionary, the meaning of life and the wording of it fully supports being alive in misery, right? Now, go read it now. Read it, right? So there's no reverse psychology argument or nonsense jargon possible, right? No bluff, right? It's clear. Now, Article 2 clearly states, absolutely explicitly, the government shall protect life. That's keeping it alive, whether happy or sad, according to the dictionary. There's no other argument around that, right? And it says that the government has to protect it in law. The law must protect it. So all laws that you make and put into effect have to protect it. There can't be any law in effect that doesn't protect it, right? And there's only one exception, and that is as a result of sentence from criminal proceedings only, or pursuing crime or criminals, right? You can't have it in civil law. It has to be criminal law, right? And that's explicit. And on that basis, the Switzerland case, all the Switzerland case says, according to this, is that there was some judgment in Switzerland that, people when their life or take their life themselves, they cannot, the government or state who is the one to protect it and uphold it and look after it, right? That's what it says in here. If I'm wrong about that, you can call me out, but I don't think that I am. I'm absolutely certain. I've just read it, right? And the ironic thing about this is that even if they pass this law, and even if Charles gives assent to it, in England, at any time, a judge can say that it's not compatible with the convention, right, and send it back to them. And the king can even act as the government while it's now. The king can act as the government even when he's giving assent to it or stages, right? Now, this is the thing with this also as well, right? If you end up in a court and you want to challenge it, You can do it at the same. If you're going to prosecute the government for misconduct in public office or perjury of oath, right, for lying about this compatibility, at the same time the judge can even declare that it's incompatible anyway, because he's got a legal right to, right? So it's not something only cognisable, decidable only in Parliament anyway. EU Convention rights are cognisable and decidable in courts by judges, ironically, right? Which is hilarious, right? So if you prosecute someone for perjury or misconduct in office or falsifying facts and evidence, right, you can actually have that. The judge can say, you've been prosecuted for perjury, misconduct in public office, a fraud, for falsifying that this is compatible, because the judge has a legal right to declare it's not compatible. So he can actually hear the case anyway in the prosecution against it. When it comes down to privilege, it's not something that only Parliament can decide. I would probably argue that I like to support British parliamentary privilege, that MPs have the privilege of not being arrested even though they're being prosecuted, right? I think that they can be arrested even though they're not. That, like, if you're prosecuting them, they have the privilege of not being, put handcuffs on and detained while you're prosecuting them in the court. I think they're allowed to even have someone turn up to represent them, but if it's an indictment or whatever, proceedings can go all on at the same time, as Parliament, but that they're not to be under arrest, right? Obviously, so you don't have to put them on bail, because I don't think they can be arrested anyway. Obviously, if they don't turn up, then the case will go on without them, right? But, maybe they can send someone in to represent them. I'm an advocate for freedom from arrest, right? But the judge can definitely hear the case and declare it's incompatible, because they said that the judges can do that, right? But there's another twist on that, and that's this, right? Wrap your head around this, right? The Article 2, right, says that you can't have you can't take life away through law unless it's in pursuit of it's a criminal sentence or in pursuit of crime, right? Can't be civil. So if they passed it, and then let's say you did end up in civil procedure, and let's say that you want to raise incompatibility, you'd be in civil proceedings raising incompatibility with something that isn't meant to be allowed to be in civil proceedings. So to be in a situation where you were challenging it, like in the High Court, for legality, because someone had to end their life and someone said, oh, well, I'm going to challenge them and say that it's incompatible with the convention, right? You're arguing whether they can take their life or not in civil proceedings, and someone would be trying to protect their life, and they would be trying to take their own life away, and you would be in civil proceedings, and the government would be deciding, right? But you can't take it through civil proceedings. So the whole court case would be illegal. But you can take a life away through criminal proceedings. But ironically, let's say Kim Leadbeater got prosecuted. Let's say we charged her for treason, right, now, and she went to court. And, she's like acting against the law of the whole country, right? And they say, well, it's treason. And then you say, well, the judge can decide it's treasonous because he can decide that the bill's incompatible with the convention, right? Yeah. And that if the judge agrees that, the only way to take life is through criminal proceedings, like, you're in criminal proceedings because you're challenging her with treason. But ironically, she won't get the death penalty. I think there's some mastermind behind this. If Tony Blair hadn't repealed it, she would have done, right? So she would have been facing the death penalty herself, and the only reason she wouldn't get the death penalty is because, Tony Blair removed it and got rid of it, right? Well, she's wanting, to be in a court pleading that someone should die and can die, right? You might get someone defending that person, even though that person wants to die, and that other person might be wanting to get the judge to declare it's incompatible, but you're not meant to decide it in civil proceedings, because civil proceedings can't, right? Some people know all these points. There are some of them who are quite clever, and they know these points. There's an irony in it. They know there's a point to be made behind it, particularly with Tony Blair and the whole death penalty. You're suddenly switching it from it can only exist in criminal, and now you're trying to bring it in civil. But they scrapped all the criminal ones and the criminal sentences, right? So there aren't any. This Jersey State Declaration is tosh, right? And I know that it's not the most intelligent word to use, tosh, to throw it in, right? I'm trying to use it for effect. Maybe it sounds unprofessional, right? All they've done here, right, is they've written out a sheet of paper. I could type this out, right? Look, I could type that in bold writing and make it look really official, right? And he's put state graph 2025 PS35, all the numbers on it, blah blah blah. Signed. Where is the signature? I don't see a squiggly signature. It's just typed. You know, I'm not even asking for an ink one, right? That's not a signature, right? He just said, Deputy TJA Bennett Saviour, Minister of Health, Social Services, I declare that this is compatible with Human Rights Act. Absolute tosh. What the most, I've just declared it now, right? And then here are the arguments below, right? This is a false statement. It's not compatible. It's very unprofessional, a paper. It's not a unique paper. It's not a professional paper. It's not a thorough paper. It's long. It's going to have to be long to look professional, right? It's long because it's full of stuff that is absolutely irrelevant and not at all relevant. Look at all this. None of this is relevant to Article 2. Now, this whole paper here, right, all this jargon, look at all this jargon here, right? Look at all that. Do you know how much of this actually talks about Article 2 itself, right? About, like, less than a page, like one paragraph or 2 or 3, 4 paragraphs, right? A few paragraphs, right? Of which one of them throws in a very tenuous Switzerland case, like about, whether people want to take their own lives, not the government taking their life, right? And does not argue, there's absolutely no discussion, argument, criticism, extrapolation, intelligent discussion at any university dissertation level about what does Article 2 really mean and what are the possible meanings of it, for and against, and is it absolute, right? And, are they going to say, well, it would heavily suggest that it's an absolute, explicit, non-negotiable, that it can only be done in criminal proceedings, right? The government's actions, and that's what we're trying to get through in law, something for the government to do, but we can't have that, right? Because you can't have it in civil proceedings, only for crime, right? And then this ridiculous, insertion of this Switzerland case as the worst example ever. It's the worst example possible, right? People taking their own lives, right, or whether they've got the right to want to end their lives early, has got absolutely nothing to do with the government taking their life or a court and what type. And it doesn't argue what type of proceedings it is, right? Doesn't say, well, actually, it's not criminal procedure, so we shouldn't do it. When in fact, we're told we can't do it, right? And then they haven't even explored what does life mean, right? If you're going to say the right to life, right, and then someone can take away their life, what does life mean? What's the meaning of life in a dictionary? And I don't mean like in a philosophical way, right? In a dictionary, if you are going to go into a court and say legally, what is it to protect life, right? What does the interpretation legally mean to protect life, right? And in the dictionary, right, and these are the words that we use in the English language when we communicate, and these are the words that mean what it means when you say it, right? Because if it didn't, how can you have a law on it, right? The meaning of life is alive and living, not dead, right? Still alive and living. And then in order to protect it is to keep it alive, right? That's how you protect it. And it also explicitly says in the meaning of life that life means to be alive in the live state, regardless of your emotional state or temper, even if it might be sad or unhappy, right? And that is life, right? That's what life means. Alive, regardless of what state of happiness or sadness you're in, right? So, I mean, the Jersey graph, is grafting, like grafter, right? And it's funny that it's like, Lord Joff or Lord Jeff was the one who introduced this, 2004 in England, just, 5 or 6 years after the Human Rights Act had been enacted, and it was slipped his mind. He was trying to get it through then. I don't know why they bothered to enact that Human Rights Act if they didn't want to uphold it, right? So this is not a serious document, right? It's not, you can't take this document seriously. It's not a serious document. It's not to say that a government of a whole country is responsible for an entire population of people, right, and protecting their lives, wants to try and put a law through that they can take lives away. So they cobble together a college standard document, plagiarized from various sources. They fill it in and extrapolate it so it's really long with a lot of non-relevant stuff and jargon, so it looks like it's lengthy. And then the actual point which makes them in law that sets that they can't actually do it, they have to really include that, right? But they put about a paragraph in and then, dress it around with like the worst case example from Switzerland that you could ever possibly have. It's got nothing to do with what the government itself should be doing or shouldn't be doing or can and can't do. Focuses purely on, the person wants to die, right? This is a thing. It's almost like this sex change type thing, and they're trying to get anything that anyone wants they can have, apparently if they can, get a court to decide it or if they've got the money for it, right? I want some court cases, but I can't afford it. No one will, I don't know how they're setting them up with these immigrants getting set up with these judges. They must be on some special procedure that, Sir Ken McCallum's arranging through, pop-up links or whatever that direct them to the exact lawyer who won't say, I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity, right? This is the thing. This is not substantial. I'm still going to report to Jersey police, right? I'm telling Jersey police what is wrong with this declaration, right? This declaration is misconduct in public office. It is a perjury of oath to make the statement that is compatible with the Human Rights Act. When you say, well, will the police decide that? Well, the thing is, a judge can decide it. Judges can decide incompatibility with human rights in criminal proceedings. So when you're prosecuting them for perjury or misconduct, it can be decided that it's not compatible in order to prove that it was perjury, right? It's a perfect setting for it, right? That Switzerland case is to do with what the person thinks themselves, and if they've got, if they should or should not have got the right to take their own life themselves. It doesn't actually. It's not the government, right? From what I read, and that's what the government can't do, right? In the Human Rights Act, Article 2, it says that the government's not allowed to take the life. It's the rules for the government itself, right? So we shouldn't get distracted on what the person wants or what the person has a right to themselves or hasn't got a right to, because it's not about the person. Article 2 is not about the person. It's not about the sufferer. It's not about the patient. It's not about the person who's ill or the person who wants to die. The Article 2 doesn't mention the person themselves. It mentions what the government can and can't do. And it's the government who are enacting the law and putting into effect and whether they're allowed to do or not, and what the law in effect can and can't do, which is they can only do things through the criminal process, right? That's what it says. And then you go into the meaning of life. What does life mean, right? Are you protecting life if you take it away? Well, no, you're not. You're not protecting life if you take it away. You might say, well, animals and predators, right? Are you, protecting life by, killing a lion if it's going to eat an antelope, right? But that's for food, and that's the animal world, and it's under different law than human beings, right? You've got to get the dictionary out, and you've got to say, what does life mean? And it means that in that live state, still living alive, right? That state. So you're protecting that state in the alive state. And it even says that it includes being sad or unhappy or miserable, right? As being alive and alive and part of it in the human experience, right? Go check it, read it, right? So these, and I don't want the situation to, I wouldn't be happy about the situation happening upon me, but I've spent plenty of times in misery anyway. Many people have and do, and that's what the dictionary says. So for the interpretation of the short sentence, what is it to protect life? It's to keep it alive for sure, right? And uninjured, regardless of, whether it is happy or sad or whatever, right? That's clearly what it is. So the government aren't protecting the life by ending it at all in any meaning or interpretation whatsoever, right? And this Jersey State government need to sort themselves out, right? They need to get the Jersey State police in, and they need to get into court, right? And these people need to be prosecuted. I know it's a majority it's difficult for it to happen, you know, because they're a majority in that government, right? And how are a minority going to take on? Do the minority even want the others prosecuted? You know, were they really that opposed to the bill, or was it a bit of a setup? Was it all staged, right? Was it staged, you know, to make it look like, you know, there was a bit of opposition? They're all meant to be independent MPs, but they're all, you know, they're all World Economic Forum, you know, Klaus Schwab, sort of Tony Blair, Blairites, even though they're independent, and they're full on this EU stuff. But they don't even really properly fully understand the EU stuff. That Switzerland case is not relevant. They've tried to find something. What can we patch this up with, right? They've tried to find something we can shoehorn into this to give the most tenuous excuse, and then we've got to extrapolate around that to try and kind of like distract away from it and fill it in, make it look like it's a real long, serious, important document. This is not a university dissertation, right? The most important and critical thing in an assisted dying bill, right, is Article 2, right? That should be 70% of the whole document, all talking about that, and lots of philosophical debate and discussion on it for and against, with what does the life mean, and very, very, very strict discussion around what the legislation is, and if it's explicit, which it is, the Article 2 is explicit. It's not like if, but, or measuring it up, or weighing it up, or deliberating, or, what's a reasonable response, or what's proportionate. There's no proportionality in that. It is explicit. You cannot have, in law, right, a government taking life other than in criminal proceedings, right? That is it. There's no deliberation. There is no how proportionate is it? You know, there is absolutely zero negotiation in it. It is absolutely clear and explicit, right? And that's the part the government can't do, and it's them who try to get the law put through, right? I'm right about this. They're wrong. This is absolute tosh. It is a college paper. It's a college paper which is made to be very, very long with irrelevant jargon stuff. Someone's put a declaration at the top of it, and then buried somewhere in it is a little bit about Article 2, and we better actually include Article 2 itself, you know, like we better quote it, at least mention it in there, you know, seeing that it's the main legal determination of whether we can do this or not, right? And then, you know, we'll go have some kind of case study example, or damn, there aren't any because we're not meant to be doing it, but, you know, there was that tenuous Switzerland case, like, you know, Eurovision, you know, it's like the Eurovision Song Contest. Can anyone come up with a case? It's like the Eurovision legal case contest. Can anyone come up with a legal case that can bluff us away into a nightclub, which can blag us away into get this bill through? Anyone? Oh, Switzerland, is that the country that's got the hospital cross flag as well, or something like? You know, there's an ambulance coming, woo 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 woo. You know, absolutely scandalous, right? Scandalous. This is not a compatibility declaration. This is Lord Josh, right? Lord Joff jargon, right? This is not compatible. This is a crime by the Jersey state government. They're perjury of oath. They are lying. It's a very poor paper. I think it's misconduct in public office, and they're trying to blag it. They're lying to get it through, committing fraud, right? And they've tried to, we're legitimately cobbling together a case, right? You know, because if Scotland don't get it through, or England, you know, how many balls can you kick at soccer nets to try to get one in? Like, you know, they've got the Scottish trying to kick it in, and then they've got, like, you know, the English government trying to kick it in. I thought there was two bills. I thought there was one in the House of Lords, because they were both worded differently. When they first introduced them, they both had a different title, right? And I thought that Falconer was doing one and Kim Leadbeater was doing one, right, in England, but it turns out it's the same one. And I thought you introduced it in the Commons, and then it goes through to the Lords, or you introduce it in the Lords and it goes through the Commons, not they both introduce it together, right? That threw me off, right? So it's very, you know, some people are going to be arguing for this, but I can guarantee you, right, the correct arguments are not in here. If the police go into a court, right, and say, what does life mean? Well, it means in the alive state, and to protect it and keep it alive, regardless of whether happy or unhappy. Read the dictionary, right? And then they say, well, what does Article 2 say? It says that you can't take a life from a government unless it's criminal process, but they're trying to make civil law. There's no negotiations around that. Then they say, well, all they've got is a case in Switzerland says that people have a right to end their own life if they want to, but that's not the government ending it, right? So there's